Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever been completely blindsided by someone you trusted? Someone who seemed charming, confident, even brilliant, and then they betrayed you? Or sabotaged you, or drained every ounce of your energy, and you sat there, confused, asking yourself, how did I not see this coming? Or maybe the person you couldn't figure out was yourself. You made a decision you knew was wrong. You kept repeating the same patterns. You let your emotions take the wheel and drive your life straight into a wall. If either of those hit close to home, then what you're about to hear might be the most important 20 minutes you spend this year. Because today, we are going deep inside one of the most powerful books ever written about human behavior. A book that took Robert Greene years to research and write. A book built on psychology, history, philosophy, and the raw truth about why people do what they do. The Laws of Human Nature. This is not a feel-good book. It does not sugarcoat who we are. It holds up a mirror and it asks you to look, really look. And once you understand what you are seeing, you will never be manipulated, blindsided, or confused by people the same way again. Let us get into it. But before we do, if you are serious about upgrading your mind, your relationships, your strategy, and your life, then hit that subscribe button right now from Millionaire Playbook. This channel is built for people who do not just consume information. They implement it, they apply it, and they use it to change the direction of their life. So subscribe and let us get into this book. Introduction: Why this book exists. Robert Greene opens this book with a deceptively simple question. Why do we keep getting blindsided by people? Why do we fall for the same types again and again? Why do we make decisions we know are bad and then watch ourselves make them anyway? His answer is both uncomfortable and liberating. We live on the surface. We react emotionally to everything. We form simple stories about people, and we almost always exclude ourselves from the darker descriptions of human nature. It is always the other person who is envious, manipulative, irrational, or delusional, not us. Greene says that is wrong, and he's going to prove it, law by law. The book presents 18 laws of human nature. Each one reveals a hidden force operating inside all of us, forces that were shaped by 5 million years of human evolution, forces that drive our behavior today, right now, whether we like it or not. And here's the core idea of the entire book. You cannot change what you do not understand. But once you understand these laws, you gain power over your own reactions, power to read other people more accurately, and power to stop being a passive victim of forces you never knew existed. Let us get into it. But before we do, if you are serious about upgrading your mind, your relationships, your strategy, and your life, then hit that subscribe button right now from Millionaire Playbook. This channel is built for people who do not just consume information, they implement it, they apply it, and they use it to change the direction of their life. So subscribe and let us get into this book. Law 1. Master your emotional self. The Law of Irrationality. Here's something Robert Greene wants you to accept right now. You are not as rational as you think you are. None of us are. We believe we make decisions based on logic and reason, but what we're actually doing most of the time is letting our emotions drive and then using our intellect to justify the ride afterward. Greene gives us the extraordinary example of Pericles, the great Athenian leader. Around 432 BC, Athens was facing the threat of war with Sparta. The public was emotional. The hawks wanted to attack. The doves wanted to surrender. Fear, anger, and nationalism were flooding the assembly. But Pericles did something remarkable. He didn't react emotionally. He slowed down. He thought carefully. He looked at the real strengths and weaknesses of each side, and he proposed a completely novel strategy. Don't fight Sparta on land where they're strongest. Instead, use Athens' superior navy, drag the war out, drain Sparta's resources, and force a real peace. His plan was built on clear, cool, strategic thinking, not on emotion, not on pride, not on what felt good in the moment. Greene calls this the inner Athena. Athena was the goddess of wisdom and practical intelligence, and developing this quality inside yourself, the ability to think clearly instead of react emotionally, is the single most important skill you can build. So how do you actually do this? First, you have to recognize your emotional triggers. What situations cause you to immediately react? What topics make you defensive? What people push your buttons? Make a list, write it down. Those are the zones where your rationality goes offline. Second, beware what Greene calls the inflaming factors. Urgency is one of them. When you feel pressured to decide right now, that's almost always when you make your worst decisions. Another inflaming factor is group emotion. When everyone around you is excited or afraid, it's incredibly easy to get swept up. Notice that. Step back. Third, create a practice of what Greene calls reactive thinking. Before you respond to anything charged, pause. 1 breath, 1 second. Ask yourself, is my response here coming from clarity or from emotion? That single question will save you from more damage than you can imagine. The bottom line from Law 1 is this: your rationality is not a default setting. It's a skill you have to deliberately develop and practice, and it will become your single greatest competitive advantage in life. Law 2. Transform self-love into empathy. The law of narcissism. Here's a truth that might sting a little. We're all narcissists, every single one of us. The only question is where we fall on the spectrum. Greene explains that from the moment we're born, we need attention like we need air. We build a self-image, a version of ourselves that we love and protect, and that's healthy to a degree. But the problem is that this self-absorption naturally turns our attention inward. We become the center of our own universe, and when that happens, we lose our ability to truly connect with others. Deep narcissists are people whose self-image was broken in early development, usually through either abandonment or being smothered. They never built a stable internal sense of self, so they spend their entire lives desperately seeking validation from the outside world. Greene describes the signs clearly. Deep narcissists react with outsized rage when challenged. They constantly redirect conversations back to themselves. They're prickly, oversensitive, and prone to paranoia. They treat people as tools for their own emotional fuel, and they almost always position themselves as the victim. Here's why this matters to you. These people will absolutely destroy your energy if you get close to them. They will consume your time, your confidence, and your emotional bandwidth. And they're often charismatic and charming at first. That's the trap. Learn to spot the signs early. The excessive self-reference, the inability to listen, the subtle competitiveness in everything, the hair-trigger anger when any boundary is tested. But here's where Greene takes a genuinely powerful turn. He says the antidote to narcissism, both in yourself and as a way of dealing with others, is empathy, real empathy, not sympathy, which is just feeling bad for someone. True empathy is the active skill of placing yourself inside someone else's perspective and genuinely understanding how they see the world. Here's how you practice it daily. When someone speaks to you, turn off your inner monologue. Stop thinking about your response while they're still talking. Listen to actually understand them, not to evaluate or reply. Then ask yourself, if I were in their specific situation, with their history and their fears, what would this feel like? The more you practice this, the more powerful you become socially. People feel genuinely understood. That feeling is rare, and when people feel it with you, they trust you, they open up to you, and they're naturally drawn to you. Law 2. Transform self-love into empathy. The law of narcissism. Here's a truth that might sting a little. We're all narcissists, every single one of us. The only question is where we fall on the spectrum. Greene explains that from the moment we're born, we need attention like we need air. We build a self-image, a version of ourselves that we love and protect, and that's healthy to a degree. But the problem is that this self-absorption naturally turns our attention inward. We become the center of our own universe, and when that happens, we lose our ability to truly connect with others. Deep narcissists are people whose self-image was broken in early development, usually through either abandonment or being smothered. They never built a stable internal sense of self, so they spend their entire lives desperately seeking validation from the outside world. Greene describes the signs clearly. Deep narcissists react with outsized rage when challenged. They constantly redirect conversations back to themselves. They're prickly, oversensitive, and prone to paranoia. They treat people as tools for their own emotional fuel, and they almost always position themselves as the victim. Here's why this matters to you. These people will absolutely destroy your energy if you get close to them. They will consume your time, your confidence, and your emotional bandwidth. And they're often charismatic and charming at first. That's the trap. Learn to spot the signs early: the excessive self-reference, the inability to listen, the subtle competitiveness in everything, the hair-trigger anger when any boundary is tested. But here's where Greene takes a genuinely powerful turn. He says the antidote to narcissism, both in yourself and as a way of dealing with others, is empathy, real empathy, not sympathy, which is just feeling bad for someone. True empathy is the active skill of placing yourself inside someone else's perspective and genuinely understanding how they see the world. Here's how you practice it daily. When someone speaks to you, turn off your inner monologue. Stop thinking about your response while they're still talking. Listen to actually understand them, not to evaluate or reply. Then ask yourself, if I were in their specific situation, with their history and their fears, what would this feel like? The more you practice this, the more powerful you become socially. People feel genuinely understood. That feeling is rare, and when people feel it with you, they trust you, they open up to you, and they are naturally drawn to you. Law 3. See through people's masks. The law of role-playing. Every person you meet is performing, every single one, including you. We all wear masks. We have the public self we show the world. We have the private self we guard. And often, the bigger and more exaggerated someone's public performance, the more they are hiding underneath. Greene teaches you to read the second language of people. Not their words, not even their stated intentions, but the subtle cues they cannot fully control. Their micro-expressions, the tension in their body, the mismatch between what they say and how they say it, the moments when their mask slips. The key principle here is this: look for contradictions. When someone is overly confident, look for what they are insecure about underneath. When someone is aggressively moralistic and self-righteous, look for the shadow behavior they are hiding. What people loudly advertise is often the opposite of what they secretly fear. Learn to watch people's behavior over time rather than judging them by single moments. Character reveals itself in patterns, not in isolated events. The person who is always charming to you but dismissive to the waiter. The person whose stories always make them the hero and everyone else the fool. These patterns are telling you something real. Practical step. For the next week, choose one person in your life and observe them as a scientist would, without judgment. Just notice. Notice the gap between what they say and what they do, between how they present themselves and how they actually behave under pressure. You will be astonished at what you see when you are truly paying attention. Law 4. Determine the strength of people's character. The law of compulsive behavior. People cannot change their fundamental character. This is one of the hardest truths in the book, but once you accept it, it will protect you from enormous amounts of wasted time and emotional damage. Greene argues that by adulthood, people have developed deeply entrenched patterns of behavior, patterns formed in childhood, shaped by early experiences and reinforced over decades. These patterns become compulsive. People repeat them even when they know they are destructive, even when they promise to stop. The person who always plays the victim, the person who always undermines authority, the person who always self-destructs just when things are going well. These are not random. They are deep character patterns running like software in the background. How do you identify someone's true character? Greene says, look at how they behave when things go wrong. Anyone can be charming and generous when life is easy. Watch how they handle disappointment, failure, criticism, or the success of others. That is the real character test. Also, look at their relationship history, not just romantic relationships, friendships, former bosses. If someone has a trail of broken relationships where they always blame the other person, that is a pattern. You will become part of that pattern. The practical move here is this: do not focus so heavily on what people tell you about themselves or their intentions. Focus on what they have repeatedly done. The past is the best predictor of the future, And when someone shows you who they are through their behavior, believe them. Law 5. Become an elusive object of desire. The law of covetousness. We want what we cannot have. This is one of the most primal and persistent features of human psychology, and once you understand it, you can use it deliberately. Robert Greene uses the story of Coco Chanel to illuminate this law. Chanel grew up in poverty and deprivation, raised in a convent where luxury was forbidden, and that very prohibition is exactly what fueled her lifelong obsession with elegance and desire. She understood instinctively that scarcity creates longing. The law is simple. Too much presence kills attraction. When you are always available, always accessible, always visible, people stop valuing your presence. But when you pull back, when you create distance, when you become slightly mysterious and harder to reach, desire increases. This applies in business, in relationships, in personal branding, and in how you're perceived professionally. The person who always agrees, who is always enthusiastic, who is never unavailable, becomes invisible. The person who has standards, who sometimes says no, who has a life and a perspective that is distinctly their own, becomes interesting. But Greene also turns this law inward. He warns against being someone who always wants what other people have. The person who constantly covets their neighbor's career, relationship, lifestyle, or attention is someone who can never enjoy what they actually possesses. Their fulfillment is always somewhere else, always just out of reach. The practice here is embracing your actual circumstances and making something meaningful from them. This is not passivity. It is the recognition that desire without direction is just restlessness. Law 6. Elevate your perspective. The law of short-sightedness. Most of the worst decisions in human history were made by smart people who were thinking too small. They were focused on the immediate, on the emotion of the moment, on the pressure right in front of them, and they missed the larger picture entirely. Greene calls this short-sightedness, and he says it is one of our most dangerous default settings. We're wired to see what is immediate and close. Our brains evolved in a world where the threat right in front of you was the one that mattered most. But the modern world requires something different. It requires the ability to think across long time horizons and see second and third-order consequences. He identifies 4 signs of short-sightedness you need to watch for in yourself. First, unintended consequences. You take an action to solve a problem and create 3 new ones you did not anticipate. Second, tactical hell. You're so busy fighting fires that you never step back and ask whether you are even fighting the right war. Third, what he calls ticker tape fever, where the excitement of a moment sweeps you into a decision before you have thought it through. And fourth, getting lost in trivia, spending your energy on small things while the important things are neglected. The antidote is what Greene calls the far-sighted human. This person deliberately steps back from any situation and asks, what will this look like in 6 months, in 5 years? What are the possible unintended consequences of this choice? Who will this affect beyond what I can immediately see? The person who can see farther than the moment will almost always outmaneuver the person who cannot. Law 7. Soften people's resistance. The law of defensiveness. When you try to directly change someone's mind, you almost always make them more resistant. This is one of the most counterproductive things we do in relationships, in negotiations, in leadership, and in parenting. Greene's key insight here is that human beings have a deep, almost allergic reaction to feeling controlled or told what to think. The moment they sense that you are trying to change them, a wall goes up. And no amount of logic or evidence will bring that wall down by force. The solution is indirect influence. Instead of pushing your agenda, you start by making people feel genuinely heard and understood. You confirm their self-opinion. You validate what they already believe about themselves. And from that place of trust and openness, they become far more receptive to considering your perspective. Greene outlines 5 strategies for becoming a master influencer. Start by listening with genuine curiosity, not as a performance, but as a real practice. Second, infect people with the right mood. Your emotional state is contagious. If you come into a conversation calm, curious, and warm, you raise the emotional temperature of the room. People respond to your energy before they respond to your words. Third, confirm their self-opinion. Every person has a story about who they are. Honor that story. Even if you disagree with their position, address the version of them that is reasonable and address that version. Fourth, plant seeds rather than force conclusions. Raise questions, offer a different angle. Let them arrive at your conclusion on their own. And fifth, sometimes use their own resistance against them. If someone is stubborn, instead of pushing harder, step back and agree with part of their position. They often push themselves into your direction just to avoid the full agreement. The bottom line is that influence is a long game. Patience and emotional intelligence will always outperform force. Law 8. Change your circumstances by changing your attitude. The law of self-sabotage. This is perhaps the most psychologically profound law in the entire book, and the one most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Robert Greene argues that the biggest obstacle between you and the life you want is not other people, not your circumstances, not your resources or your background. It is your attitude, the lens through which you interpret everything that happens to you. He contrasts two fundamental attitudes, the constricted attitude and the expansive attitude. The constricted attitude is built on fear. When you operate from this place, you see threats everywhere. You interpret ambiguity as danger. You avoid risk. You become defensive, rigid, and closed. And because your mind is focused on what can go wrong, you tend to attract exactly those outcomes. You self-sabotage not out of stupidity, but out of an unconscious belief that you do not deserve better. The expansive attitude is built on openness and curiosity. When you operate from this place, you interpret challenges as opportunities for learning. You see other people as potential allies rather than potential threats. You take calculated risks because you trust in your ability to adapt and recover. Here is the powerful part. Greene argues that this attitude is not something you are born with. It is something you develop through practice and through conscious choice. You can literally rewire how you interpret events by consistently asking, what can I learn from this? What opportunity is hiding inside this obstacle? Daily habit. Every evening, write down one difficult thing that happened, and then write one genuine opportunity or lesson it contains. Do this for 30 days. Your brain will begin to automatically look for the silver thread inside the difficult moments. And when your attitude shifts, your entire experience of life shifts with it. Law 9. Confront your dark side. The law of repression. Every person has a shadow, a hidden side, composed of all the impulses, desires, fears, and qualities they have repressed because society, family, or their own self-image told them those qualities were unacceptable. Robert Greene uses the cautionary story of Richard Nixon to illustrate this with devastating clarity. Nixon presented himself as a man of principle, peace, and moral character. He genuinely believed this about himself. But underneath that carefully maintained image lived enormous rage, paranoia, and a hunger for revenge against anyone he perceived as an enemy. Because Nixon never confronted this shadow, never acknowledged the darker parts of his character, those parts operated autonomously. They leaked out. They drove decisions he later could not explain. They ultimately consumed his presidency in the form of Watergate. Carl Jung called this the shadow, and his insight, which Greene draws on heavily here, is that what we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves does not go away. It goes underground, and from underground, it runs us. The people who are most dangerous to be around are often those who most loudly proclaim their virtue and goodness, because the shadow has to go somewhere, and it always comes out sideways. How do you integrate your shadow?
First, you have to be willing to look honestly at the qualities in other people that trigger your strongest negative reactions. Those reactions are almost always mirrors. If someone's arrogance infuriates you, ask yourself where your own suppressed arrogance lives. If someone's neediness repels you, where do you hide your own need for attention and validation? Second, bring conscious awareness to the moments when you behave in ways that surprise or embarrass you. Instead of excusing it or explaining it away, get curious. What drove that? What was I actually feeling underneath? The integrated person is not someone who has eliminated their darker qualities. It is someone who is aware of them, honest about them, and therefore able to direct them rather than be secretly driven by them. Law 10. Beware the fragile ego. The law of envy. Envy is the most hidden and most dangerous emotion in social life, and Robert Greene is direct about it. We all experience envy. We're wired for it. We cannot help comparing ourselves to others, and when we see someone with something we want, envy is the almost automatic response. The problem is that envy is deeply shameful, so we almost never admit to it. Instead, we disguise it as criticism, as concern, as moral outrage, as sudden, inexplicable hostility towards someone who was previously our friend or colleague. Greene describes several types of enviers you need to learn to recognize. The most dangerous are the ones who appear friendly and supportive, but who are quietly working against you. They offer praise that subtly undermines. They seem to celebrate your success while finding ways to diminish it. They are attracted to you because of what you represent, and they want to take it down. Learn the signs. Watch for people who consistently downplay your achievements, who seem pleased when things go wrong for you, who compete with you in conversations, always needing to one-up your stories, who become subtly cold when you succeed. The deeper wisdom here is about yourself. When you feel envy, and you will, do not suppress it. Acknowledge it honestly, and then use it as information. Envy is your unconscious telling you what you actually want. The person whose success makes you envious is showing you a direction. Use that as fuel to pursue your own version of that success, not to tear theirs down. The person who has truly transcended destructive envy is the one who can genuinely admire and celebrate the success of others, because they're secure enough in their own path that another person's achievements do not threaten them. Law 11. Know your limits. The law of grandiosity. Success is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a person, because success has a very specific tendency. It makes you feel invincible. Greene calls this grandiosity, and it is a trap that has swallowed countless brilliant, accomplished people throughout history. You achieve something significant, the praise comes in, your confidence grows, and gradually, unconsciously, you begin to believe that your success was entirely due to your own genius, rather than to a combination of skill, timing, circumstances, and luck. And when that belief takes over, you stop doing the things that made you successful. You stop listening. You stop adapting. You take on risks that are no longer calculated. You ignore warning signs, and you fall. The antidote is what Greene calls practical grandiosity. This means channeling your ambition and your drive into something meaningful and focused, while maintaining genuine humility about your limitations. The greatest leaders and creators in history were simultaneously intensely ambitious and deeply self-aware about their weaknesses. Practical step. After any significant success, deliberately spend time identifying what you got wrong, what you got lucky on, and what you still do not know. Build a practice of honest self-assessment that doesn't crush your confidence, but keeps it grounded in reality. Law 13. Advance with a sense of purpose. The law of aimlessness. Perhaps no other law is as immediately life-changing. Greene argues that most people go through life reacting to circumstances rather than directing them. They take opportunities as they come. They drift toward what is comfortable or what others expect of them, and they accumulate years of activity without a sense of direction. He uses the extraordinary story of Martin Luther King Jr. to illustrate what a genuine sense of purpose looks like and how it is found. King didn't wake up one day with a fully formed vision for the civil rights movement. He found his purpose through a series of increasingly demanding challenges that called something out of him he didn't know was there. The key moment Greene focuses on is King's midnight kitchen prayer. Alone with his doubts, overwhelmed by fear, holding a cup of coffee and wondering whether he could continue. And from that place of genuine vulnerability, he heard the call to his purpose with unmistakable clarity. He was not seeking comfort, he was seeking direction, and it came. Greene's framework for finding your own sense of purpose involves this. Look backward at the moments in your life when you felt most alive, most engaged, most genuinely yourself. Not the moments that looked impressive from the outside, the moments that felt meaningful from the inside. What were you doing? What were you using? What problem were you working on? Then look at the thread that connects those moments. That thread is your inclination, your natural attractor. And building your life around developing that inclination into mastery is what Greene means by purpose. The person with a genuine sense of purpose is not frantically chasing the next thing. They are committed to a direction, and that commitment gives them a filter for every decision. Does this move me towards my purpose or away from it? That simple question will clarify more choices than any productivity system in the world. Law 14. Resist the downward pull of the group. The law of conformity. We are tribal animals, and our tribal instincts are incredibly powerful. When we join a group, our individual identity begins to blur. We start to think, feel, and behave like the group. We adopt its beliefs without examining them. We demonize its enemies. We suppress our own observations that don't fit the group's narrative. Greene calls this conformity, and he emphasizes that it is not weakness, it is human nature. The pressure to fit in, to belong to the tribe, is one of the oldest and most powerful forces in our psychology. But the cost is that groups lower the intelligence and the moral standards of the individuals inside them. History is littered with examples of decent, intelligent people who participated in terrible things simply because the group made it feel normal, necessary, or righteous. The antidote is what Greene calls maintaining your observer's eye. Even while you participate in a group, you retain a part of yourself that is watching from the outside. You notice when the group is drifting toward irrationality.
You hold on to your own observations, even when they conflict with the consensus. You are a contributor to the group without being consumed by it. Practically, this means cultivating some of your most important thinking in solitude. The great thinkers, artists, and leaders throughout history all shared a capacity for sustained, independent thought. They spent real time alone with their ideas, refining them, testing them, before bringing them into the group. Also, be deliberate about which groups you join and which you leave. The culture of any group will shape you, whether you intended to or not. Choose your environments as carefully as you choose your mentors. Law 16. See the hostility behind the friendly facade. The law of aggression. Not all aggression is obvious. In fact, the most dangerous forms of aggression are invisible to the casual observer. Greene distinguishes between direct aggression, which is easy to see and defend against, and passive aggression, which is covert, deniable, and infinitely more destructive. The passive-aggressive person appears reasonable and cooperative on the surface, but underneath, they are constantly working to undermine, delay, frustrate, or sabotage. They miss deadlines for reasons that always seem legitimate. They give praise with a sting buried inside it. They agree to things and then quietly fail to follow through. And whenever you call them on it, they're deeply hurt and offended. How could you accuse them of anything? They were just trying to help. Learning to recognize this pattern early is one of the most valuable social skills you can develop. Watch for the persistent gap between words and actions. Watch for people who always have plausible explanations for why things are not working. Watch for the person whose support always seems to make things slightly worse. Greene also encourages you to understand your own aggressive impulses. We all have them. When we suppress them, they find indirect outlets. When we acknowledge them, we can direct them productively. The controlled aggression that fuels great ambition, great advocacy, great art is not something to eliminate. It is something to channel. Law 18. Meditate on our common mortality. The law of death denial. This is the final law, and it is the most philosophical, and possibly the most liberating. Robert Greene argues that most of us live in a state of death denial. We know abstractly that we will die, but we do not feel it. We do not live in genuine relationship with that reality, and as a result, we waste enormous amounts of our limited time on things that do not matter, on petty grievances, on fear of what other people think, on chasing the wrong goals entirely. But here is what Greene shows through the stories of people who faced their mortality directly, whether through illness, near-death experience, or a deliberate philosophical practice. When you truly internalize the reality that your time is finite, something profound shifts. The trivial falls away. What genuinely matters becomes unmistakably clear. The anxiety about other people's opinions loses its grip, and you begin to live with a sense of urgency and intention that most people never access. He is not asking you to be morbid. He is asking you to be awake. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, began every morning by meditating on his own mortality, not to depress himself, but to clarify his priorities and renew his gratitude for being alive. The practice Greene recommends is simple but requires courage. Once a week, spend 10 minutes alone, quietly, and genuinely contemplate the fact that you will die, that everyone you love will die, that everything you are currently anxious about will eventually be irrelevant. And then ask yourself, given this reality, what truly matters to me? What do I want to have done with the time I have? That question, asked honestly and regularly, will reorganize your entire life. Let us bring it all together now. Robert Greene's Laws of Human Nature is not a comfortable book. It does not tell you that you are special and your intentions are good and the world owes you fairness. It says something harder and more useful. It says you are a human animal with ancient drives, biases, and blind spots. So is everyone else, and until you understand these forces, they will run you rather than the other way around. Here is what you now understand that you did not before. You know that your emotions dominate your thinking far more than you realize, and that building genuine rationality is your single most important life project. You know that you are somewhere on the narcissistic spectrum, and that the antidote is genuine empathy developed as a daily practice. You know that people's masks can be read, that character reveals itself in patterns, and that you can train yourself to see both. You know that short-sightedness is your default, and far-sighted thinking is a habit you build deliberately. You know that you cannot change people's fundamental character, so your best move is to choose carefully who you allow close to you. You know that envy lives in all of us, and that it can be used as information or as poison. The choice is yours. You know that success breeds grandiosity, and that humility is not weakness but wisdom. You know that purpose is not something you wait to discover. It is something you build by listening deeply to your own history and inclinations. You know that groups will pull you down toward their lowest common denominator unless you maintain your observer's eye and your independent thinking. And you know that your time is finite and precious, and that living in genuine relationship with that fact is what makes a life feel truly lived. The question now is not whether this is true. You can feel it. The question is what you do with it. Start today with one law, just one. Pick the one that hit you the hardest, the one that made you the most uncomfortable. That discomfort is the signal. That is exactly where your growth is waiting. Write down one specific way you will apply that law in the next 7 days, not someday, this week. Because here is the final truth Robert Greene leaves you with. Human nature is stronger than any individual. It will move you around like a pawn if you're not paying attention. But the moment you start paying attention, the moment you truly see yourself and others clearly, you stop being the pawn. You become the player. If this breakdown gave you value, then do one thing right now. Subscribe to Millionaire Playbook. Hit the notification bell, because this is what we do here. We go deep into the books, the ideas, and the frameworks that actually change lives, and then we build the habits to make them real. The knowledge is in your hands. Now go implement it.